So Joe, you've got one heck of a following, dude. We've probably got, I'd say, 20 more people than we usually have on the call this morning. So awesome. Thank you so much for telling all your friends about it too. And it's so good to see some friends I haven't seen in a while. Chad is on here. I see Frank. I feel like Romper Room. I see Walter Walford. I haven't seen him in a while. So good to see him. Even Ernie Smith is on here. I'm so glad, so glad to have you folks on here, sharing with us. That's just awesome. So folks, many of you know who Joe is. Joe, I gotta ask you a question. Are you part of Jay Connor's mastermind group?
I am. Yep.
Awesome. Were you there when I spoke a couple years ago?
No, I just joined in the fall of last year. So
awesome. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
He's a great guy. Yeah.
I hear his voice in my head saying things. That's a writer downer.
Yeah. He's really good. In fact, I'm gonna try to get him to come to Sunrisers and speak as well. He's a great guy. He's in a couple of my masterminds, and I get a kick out of him and his wife. They're amazing people. But folks, I'm just really, really grateful that Joe has agreed to speak with us today. He's got a lot of good stuff going on. He's got a great presentation. I just went through it, and I want to give you as much time as possible to speak. So Joe Myers, have at it. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. I hope I have, how much time do I have?
We usually stop around 8:30, but sometimes it goes to 8:45 and 9 o'clock. It just depends on how many people hang in there.
Okay. Well, I hope you hang in for the end. I spent a lot of time putting this together, but I always, whenever I speak, the speaker's always like, you gotta have less slides. You got to talk about less stuff, because otherwise you'll be talking for 3 hours. So,
well, we like lots of information. So lay it on us.
Okay. Yeah. I have a couple of resources that I'm going to give out when I'm talking. And if you go to this link right here, you go to my website, hit the resources and get them. Or if you go to this short link, it's not really any shorter, but if you go to this link, it'll take you right to them. So, I've never been to this meeting before. So I'm glad to be here and to be presenting for you all. I have I've learned a lot over the last 10 years of being in real estate. I started in 2011. In 2000, just kind of did the normal things. You start wholesaling, and then you want to start getting into rehabs, but you don't know how to do it, and just getting out there and learning how to do stuff. But I remember I was sitting at my desk in 2014, and Facebook started being a thing, and I'm like, it'd be a lot easier just to get referrals and stuff you get at the RIA meetings, just getting on a group on Facebook. So I created the Charlotte Real Estate Investors Facebook group back in 2014. I created some other ones later on. This is the property management software that I use. So created that group to kind of get some support. I didn't really start getting into all this creative stuff until 2016, 2017. 2016, I had I thought it was a good deal at the time, but I ended up in a lawsuit over a subject to deal that the sellers thought that they could, not have to move out of the house after I reinstated the mortgage, and made a lot of mistakes there. I'm not going to go through the specifics of that. I have a recording on my website where I talk about it in depth and the mistakes that I made, what to look out for in a subject to deal. But on the flip side of that, even though I lost a lot of money on that deal, and I actually still own that house today, I won supposedly after being in court for 2.5 years. I had to foreclose on the people, and during the foreclosure, I went through every single kind of court there is to go through. Regular hearing, contested hearings. We went to appeal hearings. Finally got the order for sale, and then they filed bankruptcy. So then we went through bankruptcy court, and then we got it we got it dismissed there, and then came back over to regular court and went to sale. No one bid on it, and I ended up with the house back. So it was a stressful time, but on the flip side of that, I learned a lot about foreclosures. My attorney was a clerk of court at the Mecklenburg courthouse for 7 years before he became an attorney, and he's just a wealth of knowledge on the foreclosure stuff. And then in 2017, I started there's a new attorney in town by the name of Harry Marsh, and he liked to sit on Facebook Messenger and just talk with people. So he would just talk with me for hours and hours about title stuff and kind of reverse engineering some of the stuff this creative stuff that other people were out there doing, and not really talking about it publicly until, Carl started talking about more about this stuff. And then when I was working primarily in Mecklenburg County, and then in about the middle of the summer of last year, I just decided to stop because with the foreclosure moratorium, there was less deals coming through, and there was more people investing in Charlotte and Mecklenburg, especially people from out of town that were just throwing crazy money at deals. So I made the decision to just stop working in Mecklenburg. I was doing all the stuff in Mecklenburg. I stopped, and I started looking at some of these other counties and all the stuff that I figured that, all the stuff that we do works everywhere in North Carolina. If you get clear title in Charlotte, you can get clear title anywhere. So just a quick overview of my process. It's actually funny you mentioned Jay Conner, because I got my foreclosure tracking system from Jay Conner's foreclosure tracking course. I took his course, and I call it his course. Well, I added stuff to it. I got it online, put it in Podio, built Podio systems out of it. Going down to the courthouse and doing research and preliminary title search. I learned recently I was working with a group of guys, and one of my mentors said, it's better to figure out which ones are the best deals and just go after them hard instead of trying to get a big list of leads and going after all those. So I really try and concentrate on that and see a lot of success with that. I talk about what are the best leads that I see, and then some of the kind of creative bad title. I'm not going to go super deep into the bad title stuff, but with estates and acquisitions, we, instead of trying to get a contract and getting everyone together, we'll go directly to heirs and buy their interest individually. And like I said before, this works anywhere in North Carolina, and I have proof of that. This is a little handy dandy guide that I made. I'm not going to go through it, but it talks about the foreclosure process in North Carolina. North Carolina is a judicial and a non-judicial state. Most of the ones are non-judicial, which means they're heard in front of a magistrate, or not the clerk of court, not in front of a judge. Most of them start out as non-judicial, and then if something crazy happens, or if it's something crazy to begin with, sometimes they'll file it as a judicial, which means it's heard in front of a judge, and the attorney fees are a lot more expensive. But again, if you go to my website here, you can download this as a PDF. As far as the foreclosure tracking, Jay's course, talks about, he does it I don't know if he's online now. I know he's trying to, his team or, kind of take it over, what he did originally, but he would just have a notebook and wrote down, all the file numbers, and they were going down to the courthouse and checking all the file numbers. That can work. And I used to do that. I mean, in Mecklenburg, when I was still tracking them, there was over 600 or 800 active foreclosure leads. That was before COVID. I don't know what it is now because, again, I stopped tracking them. I figured out how to check the status of a lead in the VCAP system, in the green screen system. But I kind of, so this is online, or this is my online system. Go back. Yeah, this is my online system. I can see the last date that I looked at each lead, the status of each one, the value, the file number, I don't remember what that one is. When the foreclosure date, when the order for sale is filed for. I'm tracking all of these kind of metrics on all the leads and trying to, ultimately, this is to kind of figure out which ones are the best ones to go after.
And where are you getting those leads from?
Well, in Mecklenburg and some of the bigger counties, there's companies that go down to the courthouse. They go through the bigger courthouses have a binder of all the new filed foreclosures. And there's companies that will go down there. They'll go through the binders, type up a spreadsheet, and they sell a subscription to that spreadsheet. It's a company in Mecklenburg. I remember offhand. There's Mecklenburg Times does it. There's another company that does it in Mecklenburg, and there's some other companies. But in these smaller counties, those companies don't really care about the small counties. The small counties don't really have a binder sitting outside the courthouse, like or outside the clerk of court with all the leads in it. So you can do one or two things. You can either go through all the files, or what I do is one of the metrics that I've learned is that the ones that are the most motivated is the closer to the sale they get. So instead of like looking through and looking at the new files and going through them individually, I'll just go to every courthouse has a public notice board, and they have they put the notice of sale there. So notice of sale is they've had the hearing, the judges or the magistrate or the clerk of court or the judge if it's judicial has ordered it to go to sale, and then with usually about 30 days or maybe a little bit longer, they'll set a sale date. And that sale date is when it's going to go to auction. But the leads that I mostly concentrate on are they have the order for sale, and I'll just go to this board and I'll write down all the file numbers, and then I'll go through those files and get all the information out of the files. I didn't put a notice of sale on here, but like the notice of sale has the parcel number, has the book and page of what's being foreclosed on, it has who's being foreclosed on. It has, all this stuff here. And then, yeah, so I get it from the notice of sale, and between notice of sale and actually when it goes to sale, that's when people are most motivated anyway. So that's how I concentrate it that way. So once I have the leads, I go through the, let's see, oh yeah, Courthouse Research. So this, if you've been down to the courthouse, you've seen these computers with the system, and hopefully you've learned how to use it. You may have also heard that your attorney has this on their computer in their office. Like, how did they get access to that? Well, I found out that anyone can have access to this, and I have it on my computer at home, so I don't even have to go down to the courthouse and get it. There's a company, information data or something. I don't have it on my website or whatever, but I can share how to get it. But the trick when you're going down to the courthouse to do research, and when you're talking to this company about getting access to this, is you don't tell them you're a real estate investor. I mean, real estate investors wear a lot of hats. What I tell them is I'm a title abstractor, and they're like, okay, no problem. And that has the convenience of actually being true, because what I'm doing is I'm abstracting titles. I'm just abstracting for myself. That's what when I do my preliminary titles searches, that's what that is.
Are you saying they don't like real estate or don't like investors down there, or they're not allowed?
We have a bad name for some reason.
I'm sorry, say that again.
We get a bad name get a bad rap for some reason. I don't know what that's about. So just foreclosure tracking. This is the wrong spot, but I'm gonna talk about doing the research. It's like just going down there and pulling files. Like I did my preliminary title search on this one and saw that when I was checking VCAP, I saw that there was an IRS lien. And we were talking with the seller. He knew that there was an IRS lien too. So we got the contract. We told him, hey, we'll give you $1,000, and we'll deal with everything else. And at the time we were thinking, all liens expire after 10 years. So even on IRS liens, like it says the last day that they can refile it is this date right here. So this is in the future, obviously, but at the time we're like, okay, we'll get on deed for $1,000, and then we'll wait out these liens, and this $113,000 worth of IRS liens will go away. Well, I went down there, I pulled the file. This is on the first page. The second page was this withdrawal. So the IRS lien actually wasn't even active, even though it was showing up in BCAP. So we purchased it for $1,000. We actually borrowed $7,000 of private money to purchase it, pay off the taxes, get clear title, and then we turned around and sold it 18 days later for $24,000. So example of the deal. I mentioned before, I do preliminary title searches on everything, and the biggest thing is ultimately you're going after equity. So you're trying to find the deals that have the best, have the most equity. So you're trying to figure out everything that's owed on it. And then the other reason is we do go after a lot of stuff with funky title and estates, and we need to know who the owner is. And GIS is not always accurate as to who the owner is. I remember we were working on a deal and we just could not track this one person down. And so for some reason, one of us was like, well, GIS is this, but let's go back and look at the actual deed. And we went back and looked at the deed, and there was someone else on the deed that wasn't listed on GIS. So our process for doing the preliminary title search, the very first thing we do is we look for the most recent non-sketchy looking deed, because sometimes people file their own deeds and sometimes they're right and sometimes a lot of times they're not. So I'll go back through the chain of title, and these are listed right on the GIS. Most of the counties have a GIS, different systems, but they list at least the book and the page of the deeds on that property. Another reason, if you're ever bidding at the auction, you want to know what you're actually bidding on. I've seen a lot of people bid on property that they didn't realize was in second position, not in first position. I saw an HOA foreclosure go from, I think the opening bid was like 5,000. It went up to like 80,000. And there was like, I bid on HOAs, but I know what the equity position is. And on that one, like if someone like funded that deal at 80,000, they were going to be like 30,000 over leverage on top of whatever repairs were needed on the property. So if you're ever going to bid on the auction, if you don't know how to do a title search, make sure you have an attorney that's doing it for you before you go bid, because I've seen a lot of horror stories like that.
Joe, I think it's important to mention too that HOAs can foreclose even if there's a mortgage in place.
Oh yeah.
So they can foreclose, but that mortgage is still sitting there. So that's why it's really important to do what you're talking about. When you're bidding against an HOA, there's usually a mortgage there too, and you need to know that. Good point.
Yeah. And then the other reason that we check title is if someone is dead, if one of the owners is dead, we always have to check for an estate, because there's a lot of rules about getting clear title, whether there is an estate or not, whether a estate was filed, whether it was actually probated, meaning it has a certificate of probate in the file. How far do they get into it? Did they complete it? How long ago did the person die if they didn't complete it? There's like all these rules, and you just got to know if there is an estate. Anytime there's an estate, I always go and pull the estate and look at it and see what's going on with it. This is an example of a deal that we did. You can see my preliminary title search down here. That's just kind of the overview of it, the actual documents. But on this deed, it says the grantee is this woman, Anita Pendleton, a married woman, but it doesn't name who her husband is. Mm. So when that happens, and she had died, how does it work? Well, we knew that there was like someone out there that was her husband, and oh yeah, here's how it works. So if someone's married, if the spouse is not named on the deed and the person that is named dies, like if both of them are named on the deed, the ownership goes 100% to the spouse, marital right. But if the spouse is not listed on the deed, it goes either half to the spouse, half to the kids, or like a third and 2/3. I don't remember exactly. But so he wasn't listed on there, so it went half to him and half to her 2 kids. In fact, the husband didn't even know about this house, hadn't seen this woman in like 15 years, didn't even know she owned this house. And we're calling him up and say, hey, we'll give you, some money for your interest in this property. We'll deal with everything. And he was like, that sounds good to me. He was out in Alabama. Never even knew about this house. So that's why this example, you got to check the deed before you start working on it. I worked on a property. It was in Mecklenburg. It was off of Booker, Dundee, around that somewhere. And we checked the title. We looked at the deed, and GIS had it indexed incorrectly. So the person that was listed was like 7 deeds ago. So we called them up, and they were like, we don't own that house. We sold it 10 years ago. And we called I had to go into register of deeds and follow the chain of title forward. And it was like 10 deeds forward, and GIS was just completely wrong on that one. So very important to check the actual deed, not what GIS says. On this one, when I checked the deed, it had the grantee as this guy with a life estate, remainder interest going to half to this son, half to that son. well, Ronald had died. And it's nice that the deed, if you're doing estate planning and you want, I'm not an attorney, but I've noticed that the most foolproof way to make sure a specific person gets real property after you die is to put it in a life estate, because it says right on the deed, it goes to this person, and nothing, once you die, it just automatically goes to that person. In this case, we tracked down Preston. We gave him $1,000 for his interest, or sorry, 2,000 for his interest. And he said, I haven't seen my brother in like 10 years. He's a meth head. No one knows where he is. He doesn't have a permanent address. It actually took us like 8 months to track this guy down. We hired a bail bondsman. We supposedly knew where he was. We couldn't find him. Eventually, we just posted on Facebook. This deal is in a small town, and my partner was born and raised in that small town, so he's like connected with everyone out there. And he just posted on Facebook, "Hey, we're looking for this guy. If you know him, we'll pay you $250 to get us in touch with him." And this guy reached out and didn't know where he was, and he ended up like driving Brian and his wife back and forth to the deed signing and paperwork signing, and we ended up paying him a little bit more for just making it easy for us. But we purchased it for $3,000 after we, a lot of these small towns, Mecklenburg, if you record a deed, you don't have to pay the property taxes, but there's actually a statute where 77 of the 100 counties in North Carolina can enact an ordinance that says that you have to have the property taxes have to be paid in full before you record a deed. And unfortunately, this county that we're working in is one of those counties. So we got it for $3,000. We had to pay $6,000 to pay up the property taxes, to get them current before we could record the deed. So did that. We cleaned out the house and just sold it to a guy that had some rentals out there for $24,000 net profit. As I mentioned before, we go after quality leads versus quantity, and there's a lot of different metrics. I remember I was down at the courthouse and I was working on a lead where the opening bid was like $50,000. It was off of Marsh Road. The house, as it sat, was like worth about $400,000, but it was a really difficult air title situation. And I saw a guy that I ended up working with him later on his team doing this stuff, but I just mentioned like, hey, I didn't see you working on this one, because you kind of know the people that work on the same types of deals as you when you're going down the courthouse. He's like, I didn't have 100 man hours to put into that. Go right ahead. I don't care. And he was right. We spent probably about 100 hours on it, and we ended up not getting it. It went to sale anyway, and I think Tom Moore bought it at auction, in the upset period. But so we don't look just like how much profit there is in it. How much would it cost to get into it? How difficult would it be? How risky is it? Are there title issues that we have to wait off or do something else with? Potential profit, and how motivated are the sellers? We looked at all those kind of metrics to figure out. I actually wrote those metrics straight into my system, so it's automatically calculating based on all those kind of metrics, which ones are the best ones to go after. And then I also wrote a system to, I was talking about earlier, you're looking for equity, right? So before I wrote, all this stuff in JavaScript or whatever in Podio, I just used a simple spreadsheet. So I learned that with a foreclosure, or even just like a regular mortgage, if you're trying to figure out, the seller won't tell you what the payoff is, but you're trying to figure out what it is. You could guesstimate, which is what most people do. But I actually wrote this spreadsheet, and I used this before I got all this stuff into Podio. As long as you put the loan origination date, the date the foreclosure was filed, the principal, and the other stuff that's owed on it, and the property taxes, this will figure out what the interest rate is, and it'll figure out the payoff, straight payoff if there was no foreclosure, or the estimated payoff with attorney's fees and late fees and interest built into it. And it's not accurate 100% of the time, but it's surprising how close we get to the actual payoff most of the time. So if you want that, again, you can download it on my website. Talk about the best leads. The best leads are when the house is obviously abandoned and the seller doesn't care about the house at all. So it could be the actual seller, the owner of the property, for whatever reason they abandon it, or it could be an heir. And the very best ones are foreclosures on estates, and the heir doesn't know they own the house, because you call them up and you're like, hey, were you aware you had this house over here? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, would you be interested in signing some paperwork? And I send you some money and we deal with it. Like, sure, why not? And that's how we get the best deals, because I mean, it's providing value to them because they don't want to have to deal with it. So obviously abandoned. And then with the foreclosures, a couple of things that I look for that are kind of like indications it's going to be a really good deal is no one shows up to any of the hearings. So in conjunction with that, if the time between the notice of hearing and the notice of sale is very short, meaning they scheduled the first hearing, no one showed up, so they got the order for sale, and then it's going straight to sale, like that can happen as quickly as like 30 to 45 days. If I see the dates between the notice of hearing with the hearing date, or actually the date that the foreclosure is filed and the date that the order for sale is set, and I can see that right in VCAP, the shorter that time distance, the shorter the days between those two dates, the better the deal is. And the other thing is, like, if the heirs are hard to find, actually, we worked on a tax foreclosure in Mecklenburg, where, you know, if the trustee that's filing foreclosure suspects that anyone is dead, or they find out that they're dead, someone is dead later, they have to do it. They have to appoint the court appoints a guardian ad litem, and what that person does is it's an attorney who essentially tries to figure out who the heirs are. So one of the things, if it's a foreclosure on an estate, or it says heirs of the person in the foreclosure, there's going to be it's called a GAL, guardian ad litem report, in the file. So I'll pull that and I'll see what the attorney thought the heirs were. That's one of the, you know, kind of shortcuts to it. If the report says who the heirs are, I always verify it, because not very often, but sometimes they are wrong. I looked at one where it was a tax foreclosure in Mecklenburg, and the guy, it was I don't want to name who the attorney was, but they couldn't find any heirs. They said, oh, this lady didn't have any kids. And, you know, through our efforts, we found out, oh, by the way, she did have 2 kids. And we're looking at it, we're like, well, I won't go there, but I called up the guardian, and he was like, oh, you know, send me your information. And I did, because I wanted him to update the report, because when we were trying to get title on it, you know, if there's no estate, and especially if there's, you know, if they died intestate, meaning there was no will, for title, you have to verify it. And the more points of verification on the paperwork that there is, the easier it is to get title. So if the GAL report says there's no heirs, and you know, I'm saying that these heirs over here, you know, title's gonna be like, hey, what's going on here? We need to, you know, figure out what's going on here before we get title insurance on it. So I sent them the info so you could update the report, so everything would be, you know, matching across the board. So this one was a property we worked on for quite a while. John McCartney, I think, can you turn your microphone off? Getting some background noise there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out who that is making the noise.
He muted it.
Okay, thanks.
So this was, you know, this is a driving for dollar lead. You can see my preliminary title search down there. We checked the deed, saw that it was a life estate, and with the remainder interest going to these 3 people. In the chain of title, there's like a bunch of deeds back and forth between these 2 guys. So I don't know, they're playing like hot potato with or whatever. Found out the story behind this. So there's 3 heirs. We gave each of them $500 for their interest. The house was fire damaged, obviously. About a third of it had been completely burned to the ground. And you can't see it in this picture, but it has a walkout basement. And whoever burned it down, or before or after, someone went and grabbed all the metal pillars out of the basement. I hope it was before it was burnt, because it would have been incredibly dangerous for them to do that after. Like we took the boards off and looked inside, but we were like, this is too unstable for us to even walk in here. So we just looked in from the outside. But anyway, so we purchased it for $1,500. We were going to rehab it, but we felt like it was too big of a project for us to take on at the time. We ended up selling it to the neighbor next door who was renting his house. He was in construction. He's going to fix it up for his family to live in.
Wow.
So, and we found out later that one of the heirs burned, that was the one that set it on fire. Like, there's varying stories about what happened exactly, but the heirs, they knew that they owned it. That 2 of them wanted to sell, 1 of them wanted to rent it, and one of the ones that wanted to sell was like, well, if you're not going to sell it, and if you're not going to sell it like I want it to, then, you know, no one's going to make any money out of this. And he's the one who Found out later he took the pillars out of the basement first. Then he went upstairs, set it on fire. Fire department came out, put it out. He wasn't happy with how much it had burned, so he went back and set it on fire again. So, and they had an offer for $52,000 for the house before it had been burned. So they weren't happy with that. So they each got $500 each later, knowing that they couldn't really do anything with it. Talk about acquisitions. This usually works with estate deals or estate property where the, well, not necessarily. I mentioned before, like we'll go, especially when an owner has died, we'll go directly to each of the heirs. They're usually like siblings and they may be in touch or not. Usually the properties that get into the situation, the family's not really talking to each other. That's why they haven't been able to resolve it on its own. This is why knowing what's on title, having your attorney draw up the paperwork to have it correct for title is so important on the front end. So personally, I do my own title work, but before I give any money to heirs or anything, I send my title work and everything to the attorney to verify that everything's good before I start paying people cash. So again, this draw the paperwork. This deal here, I talked about it before. It was the one with the Anita Pendleton, a married person earlier. There's 3 heirs. One was the husband that didn't even know about the house, and she had 2 kids. One lived in Charlotte, one lived in Virginia. But the person that was living in the house was the granddaughter of the lady who had died. And she wasn't an heir that was entitled to anything as far as getting title, but she was living in there. And we essentially hired her. We got the husband easy. We couldn't, the 2 kids would not talk to us. So we actually hired the granddaughter to help us get in touch with her mom and uncle. And then we offered to help her relocate her, which I looked at the original paperwork when I was putting this together, and we agreed to pay her $3,000 to get her relocated. We ended up spending a lot more than that because she had 3 evictions on her record, and it took us probably like 4 or 5 months to find her a place and get her moved into it. And we paid her, first month's rent, two months of security deposit, and we called it because you can't pay more than 2 months security deposit for Chapter 42. We actually we called it a rent bond, like just extra security for the landlord in case they defaulted, and it took extra time to get them out. So anyway, that ended up costing more and a lot more time. And then we got it, and we started working on it in March of 2020, and then Corona hit, and we were all freaking out. We'd spent like 8 or 9 months on this deal, and we had just got it and just started rehabbing it. And we're like, oh, great, are we going to be able to sell it now? So anyway, we borrowed private money on this one, $30,000, rehabbed it, reinstated the mortgage. We ended up working out really well. This is actually the last deal I did in Mecklenburg before I stopped following the foreclosures in Mecklenburg. So this is a foreclosure tracking lead. Worked out really well for us. Something I want to mention is, for whatever reason, people have it in their mind that ownership and debt go hand in hand, and if you get on title, then you have to pay off the debt at the same time, and that's not true. Like, if you want to have clear title, when you talk about clear title, it's like everything's paid off and title is good and everything's everyone has signed all the paperwork that they need to sign to transfer title. That's what clear title is. But they don't always necessarily have to go hand in hand. So we're working on this deal on Hardy Street. It was an easy estate. It was one heir. The gal report said who the heir was. But when we do cold calling and door knocking is our primary way to get a hold of people. And we had called all the numbers. We'd sent out mailers. Couldn't get a hold of this guy. So I started door knocking, and it was the 4th address on the list. It ended up being the guy's aunt. And I was talking with her, and I found out he had been in, he had a lot of drug problems, and he was in rehab, and that's why he disconnected all his numbers trying to get away from that life. So I door knocked, and I was talking with her, and the lady obviously knew the guy, but she didn't want to put me in touch with him because I didn't realize it at the time, but she thought I was one of his drug friends or whatever. So she didn't want me to, get him back, connect him with that life again. And I said, no, it's, I was wanted to talk with him about his mom's house. I didn't know if he knew what was going on with it. I can help him figure out, if he wants to sell it, I can buy it from him. I know how to do that. Or if he wants to like fix if he wants to resolve it himself, I can help him do that. I always offer to help people. I always offer to show people how to fix it themselves. And sometimes they want to do that, and that's fine. I don't, there's plenty of other deals out there, but they make the decision that, this is too much for me. I'll be happy to, take a little bit of money and you deal with it. The story. Yeah. So I door knocked. I was talking with her. She didn't want to give me his number. I said, well, I don't know if you knew about this, but I offer a $200 referral fee for if you can get me on the phone with him, whether no matter how that conversation goes, if you get me on the phone with him, I'll pay you $200. And she looked at me and she's like, you got $200 on you? I said, no, I don't have it on me, but I have it in the truck. And she said, she pulled out her phone, called him, put him on speakerphone and said, hey, this guy wants to talk to you about your mom's house. Is it okay if I give him your number? And he said, yeah. So she hung up, gave me his number and says, where's my $200? So, and I walked back to my truck. I got the $200. I gave it to her. And she said, I mostly expect you to just get in your truck and drive off. and that was the door knock and the $200 that kept on giving, because she said, oh, you buy property. I have some rental property over here that, my husband died. He managed the maintenance and stuff, but he just died. And, I think I want to get rid of some. I was like, yeah, I'll take a look at it. I mean, she says vacant, I could get into it. And I said, how much you looking to get out of it? She said, about 15,000. I said, yeah, I'll take a look at it and see that might work for me. And we ended up buying that one. And then they have some other ones. And like 2 days ago, I went and looked at 2 more properties they had that they're wanting to sell. So it was a $200. I got 4 deals out of it.
Wow.
So far, and a door knock. So.
Wow. That's awesome.
But I want to mention this one as far as like debt. Like we got on title, we had agreed to, before I gave money to him, like I want to make sure what the payoff on it was, because I asked him if he had like the mortgage statement, whatever. He was in the rehab center, so he hadn't been to the house. He told me to go to the house, look through the mail, and see if I could find a mortgage statement, which I did after I had his permission. So I got the payoff on the statement, but the payoff on the statement isn't always the full payoff. Full payoff, especially if they haven't paid for a couple of years, can include advanced insurance. The bank will pay the taxes, insurance to protect their interest. So the payoff on the mortgage statement isn't necessarily the full payoff. And I tried to give him $2,000 for his interest, and he was like, "No, the house is worth so much more than that." I was like, "I can pay you more, but I got to be sure what the payoff is." So we agreed to $6,000 once I got clear title, and he was fine with that. And then once I got more into it, there's a estate issue to where it's like a 2-year thing. There was no estate filed, so we have to wait 2 years before we can get clear title. And we'll get clear title on. She died May 24th, 2019. So May 25th, 2 years later, 2 years and a day later, we'll have clear title on it. So we own it. There's still a mortgage that's in foreclosure on it. We got on title. We ended up, what I did was, we agreed to $6,000 once we get clear title. And I called him up, and once I knew about the estate thing, I decided like, I'm good with this deal. I gave him $3,000 beforehand, got on deed. Before I had a contract for $6,000, I got on deed for $3,000, and I said, we'll give you the rest of it once we, get clear title. He called me up last week. He was blowing up my phone. Got on the phone with him and he said, I ran into some cash problems or whatever. Would it be all right if I could you give me some of it now and I'll give you a discount? I said, how much are you looking for? He said, $1,300, and I'll discount the other $1,700. And I was okay with that. I was very comfortable with the title situation. I was like, yeah, I'll give you the money now for a $1,700 discount. So we did that. He signed a contract amendment, of course. So we own this, but it's still in foreclosure. So we got to, before I can get a loan. Wendy, would Carolina hard money loan on something that had bad title?
No.
Yeah, so I gotta wait until it has good title until I get a loan on this one. Payoff is 65,000. We could
But
reinstate
you
it.
might be able to find a private lender that would.
Well, why do you think I'm presenting this one?
Yeah.
I have private money lenders that do bad title stuff, but my guy that does most of them, I have 5 loans with him right now, and he's kind of tapped out. So I got to pay him off on 1 or 2 of them. I'm actually closed. I have 2 closings today. It's going to pay him off, and he'll be willing to do this one. But
Awesome.
anyone else out there, I'm looking for more private money. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of what I do. There were some guys that I worked with that it was kind of serendipitous that the way it happened that there's some guys that I work with, and there's some other people in one of the other counties that I've just been helping them on stuff for a couple of years with some bad title stuff. And they don't know each other, and completely independently of each other, they came to me and they said, hey, would you be willing to put together a class to talk about exactly the specifics of the title stuff, the bad title stuff, foreclosure stuff, and the estates. And they said, we'll be willing. We know we'll take a lot of time away from your business. We'd be willing to pay you, well for that. And I know how much time I put into preparation for stuff like that. Like if I commit to something, I'm going to do it all the way. I'm just like, it's not really worth my time to do that. So initially I told him no, but then I was thinking if I get some other people together and to get in a class together, then it might be worth my time to do it. So I am going to do a class. I had posted on it about Facebook. I think that's where a lot of my followers came from that are on this call. But I am going to do a class, cover all the stuff, specifics of it. If anyone's interested in that, on my website, on that resources page on my website, there's a sign up form. It's going to be sometime in the next 2 weeks. My assistant's trying to find a place to do it right now. I do want to do it in person. I want to do a small group together. And talk about this stuff works all over North Carolina. Like I'm not going to say, you can't use the stuff in Mecklenburg because everyone uses it in Mecklenburg. One of the guys I learned this from, Carl Spielvogel. He teaches all this stuff and created all his own competition and stuff. But, if you're looking for deals, I mean, even the counties that are right around Mecklenburg, this stuff works there. And this stuff works anywhere in North Carolina.
It works in most states, wouldn't you say?
It does work in most states. It's just I don't know the laws of the other states, so I can't speak to exactly how an estate works in Virginia, for example.
Okay.
South Carolina.
So let's we've got a couple of people that have questions.
Sure.
Jen had a question that she put in the chat box. Can we unshare this and get back on or stop sharing? That's the word. Jen, are you able to ask your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Joe, thank you for all this information. It's great. I appreciate it. On average, how many deals are you tracking? Just on average.
I'm just tracking the best ones. So
right.
I'm primarily working in 2 counties right now. Mm-hmm. And between the 2 of them, I probably have foreclosure leads. I'm probably tracking. It seems to come and go in waves, especially with COVID now. So I have one county where right now there aren't any active like going to sale leads, but there's new foreclosures. New foreclosures are coming in. I've definitely noticed that in all the counties. And they kind of come in waves. The smaller counties, the trustees that work those counties, like the big guys like Brockett Scott or Hutchins Law or whatever, they try and file like all their stuff at the same time for that county, so it reduces the number of trips they have out there. So it kind of comes and goes. The one county, there's about 20 leads I'm actively tracking. The other county, I'm down to about 10 in that one, just because most of them have gone to sale. There hasn't been much new ones. But I also that's foreclosure stuff. Mecklenburg, when I stopped tracking Mecklenburg, had about 600 to 800 active ones. And obviously you can't check all those files, in person. So I would do it through the VCAP system. But I also have, we do a lot of driving for dollar leads because in these like smaller counties, I feel like they're more underserved as far as like investors coming in and like rehabbing property. So it's like it's a weird dynamic where, there's a housing crisis in Charlotte, but there's a housing crisis in all of North Carolina. Even in these smaller rural areas, there's a housing crisis. But at the same time, there's a lot of abandoned property that no one knows how to deal with. So I took these skills that I learned, sharpened my skills in Charlotte, and I took it to these small areas, and there's no one doing it out there at all. And we have no competition, which is why I went out there in the first place. So.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you. And just so you know, the reason I ask is I'm new getting into it. And right now I'm tracking about 400. And I'm thinking that it's not about the quantity. I'm doing like a 5-point touch on them, but that just takes a lot of time. So maybe narrowing it down. So I just wanted to know if you're doing this full time, approximately how many you're looking at. So thank you.
Yeah. That spreadsheet that I showed earlier, that's part of the reason why I wrote that spreadsheet. And so in my Podio system, I connected it with Zillow API, and I know Zillow's estimates aren't accurate, but just to get a ballpark without looking at it individually. And then I would use the payoff calculator to figure out what the payoff was on these foreclosures, and automatically it'll go in there and it'll take the value, this estimate minus the payoff, and it gets the equity number. And then I would sort it by which ones had the most equity, and those were the ones I went after.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And then I would do the title check to make sure that there wasn't something on there that was going to throw me off. So
then you put it in title check.
Sorry?
After that, you put it into your title check.
Yeah, I wasn't going to title check 600 leads.
No. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question. This is Ann McCarty. I have done a good bit of my own title work, but in trying to learn more about title work, do you have a mechanism or do you have any suggestion on how you would go to learn more about title searching?
Practice and asking your attorney and asking people who know how to do it.
So no course.
If you go down to the courthouse, there's title abstractors down there that'll, you can hire them. They don't work for any particular. Some of them work for a specific law firm, but most of them are freelance. You could ask them for help, or say, hey, hey, could you help me with the difficult stuff? Look at what they did and kind of figure out how they did it.
Yeah, I have a friend that I met there for a couple of that and call up. I was just wondering if you knew of any good kind of course to tackle that knowledge.
Of course, I'm going to show you how to do it.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Rick. There you go.
Hey, Joe, great presentation. Do you mail out at all on your foreclosure list, or are you strictly doing door knocking and such?
No, I mean, it's like I said, we figure out the best leads and we go after them hard. So it's cold calling, door knocking. Occasionally we'll do, very occasionally, specifically we'll do mailings, but I'm not doing mass mailings. And actually that, the Mountain View house that I showed, the burn house, we got 2 of the heirs and we had the 3rd heir. We had been talking with him and then he just completely ghosted us. And we called the other heirs, and they're like, oh yeah, he just does that. He just go on his hiatus out in the countryside, and he'll be out for a couple of days and you won't hear from him. And he completely ghosted us after we had agreed to the price and everything. So it'd been about a month, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna, because we were trying to get him lined up to where he could go to, we could mail we could email the UPS store that was near him. He would go in, notarize the doc, sign and notarize. We would pay for everything and have it overnighted back to us. And that's where we were at in the conversation. And he ghosted us. So what I ended up doing was I put together all the paperwork. I got, I overnighted it to him. I had the overnight envelope to him to send it back to us inside that envelope with all the paperwork with instructions. I just mailed that to him. And I never heard from him again, but I got the paperwork back.
And one other question. So when you negotiating with the bank for the payoff, so basically, are you just making up the back payments, or are you actually paying off the loan? And if you're just making up the back payments, what do you get as security? Are you getting a warranty deed from the owners, or how are you protecting yourself when you do that?
There's not really any negotiating with the banks. Just I call them up, and so part of the paperwork when someone signs stuff is signs paperwork is an authorization release. So the bank won't even talk to you without that. It depends on the deal, whether I'm paying it off or I'm reinstating it. That Jewel Flower one, we reinstated it. It made more sense. But the Hardy one doesn't make sense because the reinstatement's about half of the total payoff, and the interest rate on it's like 13% or something ridiculous. So it really depends. What was the other part of your question?
So how do you protect yourself? So what does the owner give you as far as a warranty deed or something in advance?
We get on deed. We get on title. My first mentor told me something that's always stuck with me is don't put money into something you don't own. And you know, sometimes depending on the situation, it's unavoidable, but you know, we're putting out small amounts on stuff we don't own. Like, can't think of a good example of that right now, but we get on deed before we pay any big money.
But you're checking that to make sure it's clear of other encumbrances, so you don't inherit those too, right?
Exactly. And I check it. I do my preliminary check before we go start talking to people. If I have someone on the phone and we're talking about, you know, giving them money, I make sure I have my attorney verify my work. And I'm usually right, but stuff happens sometimes. I've been doing this now for almost 4 years, like this bad title stuff, and I still learn new stuff every day. When I was at the courthouse 2 days ago, I saw something new in a file that I'd never seen before. So it's a fun event. I find all this stuff so interesting.
Do you transfer into a land trust? Is that the way you gain title primarily?
It depends on the deal. I was doing a lot of land trusts. There's pros and cons of land trusts. I don't know if you've heard Scott Patterson speak on land trust. His take on it is essentially like, if someone is looking for someone with money, if they see a property is owned in a land trust, they're probably seeing money, and they might go after you. And the trust doesn't. A trust is one court subpoena away from them knowing all your business anyway. Right. Sometimes when it's good is if you have a company and you're like getting like bank refinances and bank loans, one of the things they're going to look for is, do you have any judgments against you? And if you're doing the bad title stuff with your main company, that won't go well for you when you try and get those bank loans. So stuff where I know that there's like an active foreclosure, or if it's an active foreclosure, we're going to let the foreclosure like ride out for some reason, then I'll probably put it in a trust. But if I know we're going to if the intent is to reinstate it or pay it off, and especially if I'm going to get private money on it, I'm going to put it in my own company name.
That's good. Chad, did you want to say something?
But one other thing, we noticed it recently in Mecklenburg, because Mecklenburg doesn't require you to pay property taxes before you record a deed. So something they've been doing recently is, if they are going to go after you for paying property taxes, sometimes they'll get a lien across all your properties in an entity. So if you have, back taxes on a bunch of properties on like one property over here, but it's because of a specific reason, and you have other good properties over here, sometimes they're putting that lien across your other good properties. So that in cases like that, you would want to use a land trust.
Awesome.
I was just going to ask, Joe, I missed a couple minutes, but I know you talked about getting access to VICAP personally, but
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing if you talked about how to do that or where to go.
I'll put a post in my on my website how to do that. There's a specific company. It's a third party. You contact them and say you're title abstractor. You want to get access to VCAP.
Thank
You
you.
have to fill out some forms. It's not cheap. It costs 30 cents every time you hit enter. So that can add up quick. So I remember an attorney telling me, Harry Marsh, they do all their title searches in-house, which is one of the reasons they can turn stuff around faster. That's also why his attorney fees are higher. He told me his monthly bill for VCAP is like between $8,000 and $10,000 a month.
He gets it done quick though. We use him.
Yeah.
They get it done quick and
I
they're
love it.
very thorough.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like Harry a lot. He's the one that taught me a lot of this stuff. So I have a testimonial on my website, I think, that he said that I probably know more about title stuff than most closing attorneys. It's probably true.
Good way to learn.
Yeah.
Well, we always learn when we run into junk, don't we? Failing forward is a good thing. Because that's when we learn the most about what we do. So this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing all this with us. If you'll look over on the chat box, please save that. It's got all of his information in that chat box as well. In addition, you sent me the slides so that I could send them out. I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So the slides will be available too in our Dropbox, and of course this recording will be available as well. So real quick, again, how can they get in touch with you to learn about your class?
The website.
Which is?
joemyers.me.
joemyers.me.
And there's a resources page, and the information about the classes on there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank
Tracy,
you.
I have a question.
Okay,
How
go
do we
ahead.
join this other group that that Joe just came on to today?
How
What's
do
the
you,
name of?
it's Sunrisers?
Uh-huh.
Well, we would let you don't have to join. You just need to show up every Friday morning. We
How do you show up?
the same link you just used. It's the same link every week.
Well, the link that I used was attached to Joe's.
It's
Oh, okay. He just attached the one for Sunrisers.
that's
I
right.
see.
That's
Okay.
exactly right. And if you can also email me if you're not getting a reminder on Thursdays, you can email me wendy@carolinahardmoney.com. I am more than happy to add you to the to our reminder list. And Frank is saying, let's get back to eating breakfast. I would love to, but our dear sweet restaurant owner, John, will not allow us to come back yet, but we're getting close. If we were in South Carolina, we'd be meeting easy. We don't wear masks down here, but across the border, it's a different story. So I'm working on it, getting that set up for us. Even when we go back to the restaurant, we will continue to meet on Zoom, because I'd say about 25% of the people on this call are from out of state, and we're thrilled to have everyone here. Thank you so much. And Tom, can you close us in a prayer? Let's see if he's still here.
I'm here.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Gracious God, Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for every Friday that you allow us to get together.
Yes.
We thank you for the business entrepreneurship that we have, the spirit of helping and learning and providing and getting. And so, Father, we pray that we all do this in sincerity and honesty, and Father, to do great things to make our country great. We lift you up this morning in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.